The baby had not slept in 2 days. Maeve knew this because she hadn't slept either. She'd learned his pattern somewhere between the first night and the second. The small fisting of his hands against her collar, the half-second of absolute stillness that came before each pulse. She'd learned to brace. She hadn't learned to predict it well enough to matter. The road through the ironwood narrowed here, trees pressing close enough that she could touch both sides without stretching. Good. Narrow meant harder to track on horseback. She kept her pace steady and counted the miles the way she always did on long runs, not by landmarks, but by the pull in her calves, the ache behind her left knee that appeared around the 8th mile and stayed until she stopped. She was well past 8 miles. Kit made a sound against her chest. Not a cry yet, just a warning, that specific low note that meant the next pulse was building. Maeve pressed her palm flat over his back and kept walking. The pulse came anyway. It moved through her hand first, then through her sternum, a vibration that had no business coming from something that weighed less than a sack of grain. Her wolf stirred in response, not threatened, just startled. She breathed through it. Kit whimpered once and went still. Somewhere behind her, at a distance she couldn't calculate precisely, something would have felt that. She walked faster. 3 days. That was how long she'd been moving. She'd arrived at Clan Ashvale for a delivery. A sealed letter for the Elder Council, standard work, the kind of run she'd done 40 times before. She'd arrived to smoke and silence and one dying man who had pressed a bundled infant into her arms with the last real breath he had. North, Clan Veyron. Don't stop. She hadn't stopped. 3 days of secondary paths, roads no one mapped, forest sections so dense that twice she'd had to shift to navigate them, running low and fast in wolf form with Kit wrapped tight against her back in cloth that had been the dead man's cloak. She'd shifted back before dawn each time, cold and aching, and kept moving. She was a runner. She moved things from one place to another without being noticed, without asking questions, without getting attached to the contents of what she carried. Kit grabbed a fistful of her braid and held on. She kept walking. The iron passage opened ahead, a natural corridor between 2 stone ridges that formed the only viable northern route through this section of the border. She'd used it 6 times before. Fast, defensible if you knew the upper paths, and the only way through without adding 3 days to the journey. She saw them before she reached the gap. 2 warriors, positioned at the mouth of the passage, not blocking it, but standing in a way that made the distinction academic. Behind them, a 3rd figure on horseback. The horse alone told her something. Not a patrol animal, not a pack runner's mount. The kind of horse that existed to carry someone who didn't need to explain themselves. She stopped. The figure dismounted. He was tall, she registered that first, with the particular build of someone who had trained as a fighter long before he'd been required to think like a ruler. Dark reddish-brown hair, jaw length, pushed back from his face. A beard, close trimmed. Eyes that caught the weak morning light and held amber in them. She didn't know his face. She knew what he was. Every wolf knew what he was. She adjusted Kit against her chest and said nothing. 3 days, the Alpha King said. His voice carried without effort, the way authority did when it had stopped needing to prove itself. That's how long I've been watching my eastern border register uncontrolled pack energy every few hours. Maeve said nothing. 3 groups crossed my territory in the last 18 hours, he continued, all moving north, all following the same signal. His gaze dropped to Kit for a moment, then back to her face. You're being tracked by at least 2 of them right now. I know, she said. Then you know you won't reach the Veyron border ahead of them at the pace you're moving. I'll manage. On foot, with a child. Through terrain they know better than you do. It wasn't said with cruelty, just precision. Kit made his warning sound again. The low note, the building pressure. Maeve tightened her arm around him. The Alpha King's warriors shifted their weight slightly, their wolves responding to the signal even at distance. The pulse came. It rolled outward in a wave that disturbed the air visibly, a shimmer that any trained shifter within 2 miles would register. Silence after it, 48 hours, the Alpha King said. Give me 48 hours to close the eastern routes. You stay inside my territory under shelter until the paths are clear. Then you walk out and I never knew you existed. Why? Because that child's existence is something I'd rather manage quietly than find out about through a territorial dispute with whoever catches him. Practical. She respected practical. She still didn't move. I don't know you, she said. No, I don't know what you do with him. I've told you what I do. You've told me what you do for 48 hours. Something shifted in his expression. Not offense, not quite. You're a runner, he said. Clan work. You move things between territories. You've built a life on knowing when to trust a road and when to take the longer path. Look at what's behind you and make the calculation. Maeve looked at the passage, then at the trees behind her. She could feel it. Faint, still far, but patient. Something moving back there with no urgency because it didn't need urgency. It had her direction and it had time. She looked back at him. 48 hours, she said. He nodded once. The shelter was a border post. Stone walls, a functional roof, nothing decorative about it. One of his warriors rode ahead to prepare it. The other fell back to watch the route they'd come from. The Alpha King walked beside her and said nothing, which she appreciated. She used the silence to study him from the corner of her eye, the habit of her work. He moved without wasted motion. He didn't fill quiet spaces with speech. When they crossed a section of uneven ground, he stepped to her left without looking at her, positioning himself between her and the open side of the path, and didn't comment on it. She noticed. She didn't say anything either. Kit was quiet for exactly as long as it took them to arrive. The crying started the moment they stepped inside. Not the warning sound, the real thing, coming from somewhere below instinct and above reason, raw and unbroken. One of the warriors tried rocking him. Kit screamed louder. Maeve tried nursing him on warmed broth. He turned his face away. She tried the rhythm she'd been using for 3 days, the wordless sound that had worked twice in the ironwood. Nothing worked. The warrior stationed at the door was a large man with a scar across his jaw who had survived things that would have ended most people. After 40 minutes of Kit's crying, he was visibly tense. The Alpha King had not come inside. Maeve was aware of this because her wolf was tracking everything in earshot. That particular sharpness that came when she was exhausted and on edge and couldn't afford to miss anything. He was just outside the door, in the cold, not pacing, not leaving. She didn't examine what that meant. Kit's cries rose in pitch. The pulses were coming faster now, irregular, less than an hour between them. She could feel the energy building under his skin like pressure behind a dam. The warrior near the door exhaled through his nose. The door opened. The Alpha King came inside without ceremony. He glanced at Maeve holding a screaming infant, then crossed the room and stopped a few feet away. He didn't reach for Kit. He didn't speak. Kit stopped crying. Not gradually. Mid-breath. Completely. He turned his head toward the source of the new presence with the focused attention of someone who had located exactly what they were looking for. The room was very quiet. The warrior with the scar said. Maeve looked at the Alpha King. He was looking at Kit with an expression that wasn't quite surprise. Quieter than surprise. A man recognizing something he hadn't expected to find. And then something crossed his face that was there and gone before she could name it. A tightening around the eyes. A stillness that hadn't been there a second before. He looked away from the child. He looked at the wall. She didn't ask about it. Kit made a small, settled sound and closed his eyes. The eastern route, Maeve said. How long will it actually take to close? Tomorrow night, the Alpha King said. If the captain I sent moves fast, and if he doesn't, then I'll send someone else. He looked at her, direct. 48 hours, runner. Maeve set Kit down in the cot they'd brought in. He stayed asleep. She straightened and looked at the door, then the window, calculating. You should sleep, he said. I'll have someone watch the road. I don't sleep when I don't know the exits. 2, the door and the window. The window drops 8 feet to packed earth. The door opens east. He said it without inflection, answering the thing she'd actually said. There's a horse saddled in the stable. If anything comes that my men can't handle, you take the child and you go north. I'll send word ahead to the border crossing. Maeve turned to look at him fully. You've already thought through the contingency, she said. I think through most things. She didn't respond. She sat down for the first time in 3 days, and that was enough movement for one conversation. Outside, the cold settled into the border post walls the way it always did at elevation. Not dramatically, just persistently, finding every gap in the stone. Kit breathed steadily in his cot. The warrior with the scar kept his post near the door. The Alpha King did not leave. She told herself it was protocol. A child worth hunting was worth guarding. There was nothing unusual about it. Her wolf didn't agree, but her wolf was not currently in charge of this situation. She sat with her back against the wall where she could see both exits, and she watched the candle burn down, and she did not sleep. What she did instead was think about the way Kit had stopped the instant that man had walked in. The completeness of it, the absence of any transition. As if the child's distress had not faded, but simply ceased, like a sound cut off at its source. She'd carried him for 3 days. She'd kept him warm, kept him moving, kept him alive. He'd settled for her, slept against her, gripped her braid, and held on. He'd never once stopped crying like that for her. She looked at the cot. Then at the door, where the shadow of the Alpha King's boots was visible in the thin gap at the bottom. Still there. She pulled her knees up and folded her arms over them and stared at nothing in particular while her wolf catalogued the sound of his breathing, and she pretended not to notice. The 48 hours had started. She was almost certain they wouldn't end cleanly. The 48 hours ended at dawn on the 3rd day. Maeve knew before she was told. She'd been awake since before first light, watching the gray come in through the window gap, listening to the border post settle into morning sounds, and she'd known by the quality of the silence outside that something had changed. There was a sharpness to the air that hadn't been there the night before. Her wolf felt it too. Not threat exactly, but the particular alertness that came before news arrived. The Alpha King came in when the sky was still pale. He didn't soften it. The Eastern Captain was bought, he said. The location of this post was sold before midnight. 2 groups are already inside the territory. Maeve was on her feet. How close? 4 hours at a hard pace, less if they move at night. He set a folded piece of cloth on the table, a map, worn at the creases, well used. The northern route through Greyvale is still clean. My men verified it less than an hour ago. She crossed to the table and looked at the map. Greyvale was 3 days on foot, more with a child who needed feeding and warmth and stopping. She traced the path with one finger, then moved her finger slightly west. There's a corridor route, she said, through the Mill Valley. It runs parallel to the Greyvale Road but lower. No crossings, no checkpoints. Dense tree cover most of the way. I've used it twice. It's not on any map I've seen. No. He looked at her. She looked at the map. I'm taking you to the Varen border myself, he said. That wasn't the arrangement. The arrangement assumed a captain I'd trusted for 6 years hadn't been bought. He folded the map with the same economy he applied to everything. I'm not leaving you in my territory with 2 active groups and a child who signals his position every few hours. A larger escort would only announce the route. You have a kingdom. I have a beta who runs it better than I do when I let him. He moved toward the door. He's already riding from the eastern post. I'll send him back to the capital from here. Maeve looked at Kit in the cot. Still asleep, one fist pressed against his own cheek, mouth slightly open. She thought about the Mill Valley route, the turns she knew, the places where the path narrowed and anyone on horseback lost ground. She thought about 2 groups inside the territory and a dead man's instructions and 3 days of running that had not yet been enough. Fine, she said, but we move my way. The corner of his mouth shifted. She decided she hadn't seen it. Davin arrived mid-morning, broad through the shoulders, with a careful face that showed nothing until he had decided what it should show. He took in the situation at the border post with the particular stillness of someone who had learned not to react before he'd processed. He and the Alpha King spoke near the door. Quietly. She didn't try to overhear. She was repacking her carry, redistributing the weight, checking the cloth wrapping she used for Kit on the move. Tighter under the arms, looser across the shoulders so she could shift him without stopping. Davin's attention moved to her once. Not hostile. The look of a man who wanted to understand a situation before it was too late to affect it. Then back to the Alpha King. When they finished, Davin looked at Kit, sleeping against her shoulder. "Quieter than I expected," he said. "He's tired," Maeve said. Davin looked at the Alpha King with an expression that carried several unsaid things. The Alpha King answered none of them. "I'll manage everything until you're back," Davin said. "But I want word at every border post you pass." "You'll get it." Davin held the Alpha King's forearm briefly, the way men who had worked together a long time said goodbye without ceremony, and left. Maeve watched the door close. "He doesn't want to go," she said. "No. But he went. He always does." The Alpha King picked up his pack. She was already at the door. The first group found them on the second day. Not a direct approach. A sighting. 2 figures on the eastern ridgeline, stationary, watching. Maeve caught the movement through a gap in the canopy to her right. She didn't point. She adjusted her direction by 3 degrees north and said quietly, "Ridge. East." The Alpha King didn't look. He shifted his pack and matched her new bearing without breaking stride. They moved faster through the next stretch. The tree cover thickened as they dropped into the Mill Valley's lower section, the path narrowing to something barely wide enough for one person at a time. Kit was awake and tracking the movement of branches overhead with the complete concentration he brought to anything above eye level. No pulse had come since early morning. She had noticed over the last 2 days that his signals came less frequently when he was engaged, when there was motion to follow or voices nearby, or when he was being held and could feel the steadiness of whoever carried him. She filed that away and kept moving. They stopped at midday in a section of forest dense enough to sit without being visible from either ridge above. She fed Kit while the Alpha King doubled back to check the trail. When he returned, he settled across from her and set dried meat and flatbread between them without comment. "2 men," he said, "marking position, not closing." Reporting back. She took the bread. "They found us, but they're not authorized to act without the larger group. So we don't sleep here. We don't sleep here." He watched Kit attempting to pull apart a piece of dried cloth he'd gotten hold of somehow. "He's been pulsing less," he said. "Yesterday it was every 5 hours. Today, twice." She retrieved the cloth from Kit's grip. "When I started, it was every 2. The Alpha King was quiet for a moment. Then Kit looked up, found him, and extended both arms outward. Maeve had seen that gesture directed at herself more times than she could count. She had not, in 3 days of carrying him through hostile terrain, seen it directed at anyone else. The Alpha King looked at the outstretched arms, then at her. "Go ahead," she said. He reached over and lifted Kit with careful hands, not practiced, but attentive, adjusting his grip when Kit shifted his weight, letting the child settle himself. Kit grabbed a fistful of his shirt and stopped reaching for anything else, apparently satisfied. Maeve looked at the valley below them. The border forces intercepted the first group of trackers at the Greyvale crossing on the morning of the 3rd day. She didn't see it happen. A rider appeared briefly at the tree line, exchanged a nod with the Alpha King, and disappeared back the way he'd come. "First group dispersed," he said. "My captain got ahead of them before dawn. 2 left. 2 left." They moved through 3 territories over the following days. Each one asked for something different. In the first, her knowledge of the corridor routes kept them under cover. In the second, his authority did the work. A checkpoint at a river crossing, guards who stepped aside before he'd spoken, passage that would have cost her an hour of questioning and possibly worse. In the third, both were required. She found the path. He negotiated entry through a section of borderland belonging to a minor lord who owed him something neither of them explained. By the end of the second territory, she understood the shape of it. She had roots he would never know to use. He had standing she could never claim. They had not planned to need each other, and both of them did. She didn't say anything about it. Neither did he. Kit's pulses dropped to once a day around the fourth night. It had been gradual. 4 hours between signals becoming 5, then 6, then through an entire morning without one. His mood had shifted too, in a way she couldn't precisely describe. Less vigilant, less braced. He'd started watching the Alpha King with the focused attention he usually gave interesting light, and by the third day he turned toward the sound of the man's voice the moment he heard it. Maeve noticed all of it. She kept it noted and did not think about what it meant. The fourth night they sheltered in an abandoned drover's hut at the edge of a ridge. Stone walls, a roof that held, a single window that she blocked with her pack. Small, cold, defensible. She set Kit down on the folded cloak she used as a bedroll, and he was asleep before she finished adjusting it. They'd fallen into a watch rotation without discussing it. She took first, he took second. She took the early morning hours. Practical, efficient. She'd stopped noting how naturally they'd arranged it. She slept 4 hours, more than she'd managed in a single stretch since Asheville. When she woke, the dark was the deep kind that came after midnight, but before any suggestion of dawn. She registered it the way she always did, her body's clock, accurate from years of moving at odd hours. The watch should have changed twice. She sat up. Kit was asleep. Near the door, the Alpha King sat with his back against the stone wall, knees drawn up, a position built for staying alert and not for comfort. He had not moved to wake her. "Your watch ended hours ago," she said. "I know. You should have woken me." "I would have." The second group shifted position around midnight, moved 1/2 mile northeast, then stopped. "I wanted to be sure before I stepped away from the door." She looked at the thin line of dark at the base of the door. He'd been watching it the same way she'd watched it the first night at the border post. "They've stopped moving?" she said. "For the last 2 hours. They're holding. Then they're waiting for daylight. That's what I think." She got up and crossed to the door, and he moved aside without being asked, giving her the wall space. She crouched down and listened. The forest outside was doing its quiet work. Branch, wind, something small moving through underbrush far off to the north. Nothing with the weight or the patience of a hunting group. He was right. They were holding. She straightened. He was closer than she'd registered when she moved. The hut was small, and there wasn't much space to not be close. She was aware of the particular stillness he had, the quality of taking up space without pressing into it. Something moved through her chest, low and unhurried, a warmth that settled without asking. She felt her wolf go quiet, not the quiet of exhaustion or the quiet of safety reached after a long run. Quieter than that, pointed at something, rather than away from everything. She didn't name it. She wasn't prepared to name it. "Sleep," she said. "I have it." He looked at her for a moment. Then he moved to the far wall, sat, and was asleep within minutes. She had never met anyone who moved between alertness and sleep that cleanly, no restlessness, no transition, just a decision made and kept. She took her place at the door and watched the gap and let the warmth in her chest settle into whatever shape it was taking and did not think about it. Kit slept. The forest was still. Outside, the cold pressed against the stone walls and found every gap, and the hours moved the way hours did on long watches, not slowly exactly, but with the particular weight of time that knows it is being kept. She sat with the silence and kept it. In the morning, Kit woke before either of them and announced this at volume. They both moved at the same moment, she from the door wall, he from the far side of the room, and reached the child from opposite directions and stopped with barely a foot of space between them. Kit looked up from his cot at the two faces above him with an expression of complete satisfaction and immediately reached for the Alpha King's jaw. He let the child grab his beard. Kit found the texture fascinating. His small fingers worked at it with serious concentration while the Alpha King held still and endured it. and Maeve watched his expression in that unguarded early morning moment. Something open in it, something that hadn't been there the first day, that had arrived without announcement somewhere in the middle of 4 days of shared road. She looked away before he noticed her looking. 2 more days to the Veyron border, she said. Yes. She lifted Kit away, who protested briefly and then accepted the trade when she got him against her shoulder. She picked up her pack. The Alpha King picked up his. They left the hut as the first real light broke from the east, cold and clean over the ridge. Maeve walked ahead with Kit and her map and the knowledge that something had shifted in the night, something she had not planned for, something that traveled in her chest alongside the warmth that she still had not named and was not yet ready to. Behind her, the Alpha King followed, steady, unhurried, not like someone who had been asked to come this far, like someone who had decided to. By the time they reached Veyron land, the road had changed. Maeve felt it before she saw the first broken wall. The paths were too clear. No fresh wagon grooves, no scattered feed, no laundry lines between outbuildings. A border that should have carried movement had gone still in the wrong way. Kit was awake against her chest, heavy with the warm weight of a child who had spent most of the morning watching branches pass overhead. He had not pulsed since dawn. That too felt wrong now. The quieter he grew, the more the silence around them sharpened. Iran stopped at the crest before the settlement came fully into view. Maeve took the last few steps without waiting for him. Veyron lay below in a spread of gray timber and blackened stone. The outer houses had burned first. She could tell from the way the roofs had folded inward, the walls still standing in places where the support beams had gone. The main hall had not burned cleanly. One side of it was torn open instead, roof split and dropped in a jagged line across the center. The watchtower nearest the east field had collapsed into itself. No bodies in the open, no movement, no smoke, no crows circling now. They had finished their work days ago. Maeve stood still and looked at the ruin of the place she had crossed half a kingdom to reach. No survivors? She asked. Iran scanned the settlement from the ridge. If there are, they aren't here. Kit shifted against her and turned his face into her shoulder. She started down the slope. Iran caught her arm before she'd gone 3 steps. Wait. I've already waited 10 days. You don't know what's left in there. She pulled free. Then find out while I look. His mouth tightened. Not anger. Calculation. He turned and gave 2 hand signals she had not seen him use before, quick and precise toward the tree line behind them. No one answered. No one appeared. That meant he had hidden watchers in the high ground before they made the final approach. He had not mentioned them. She filed that away with the rest. Then he came down the slope beside her. The first body was inside the broken gate. An old man in Veyron colors, throat opened cleanly, left where he fell. Maeve did not know him. She stepped past him and kept moving. The second and third were by the well. One had died reaching for the bucket rope. The other had been dragged a few feet and dropped. Flies rose and settled. Kit made a small sound and tucked his face harder into her neck. Maeve crossed the central yard. The main hall doors hung from one hinge. Inside, tables were overturned, benches split, hearthstones scattered across the floor where something heavy had crashed through. She looked for children first. She did not know why. Maybe because she had spent the last 10 days with one against her chest, and every dead child in the world now felt personal. There were none in the hall. Iran moved through the space without touching anything. He checked corners, secondary doors, the rear stairs. When he came back to the center of the room, he said, "West Side dwellings next." Maeve nodded once. That was all she had to give him. They searched until the sun shifted west. 6 houses, a storage shed, the healer's room, the old training yard behind the hall. No living soul. More dead than she wanted to count, and fewer than there should have been for a clan of this size, which meant bodies had been taken or burned elsewhere. At the 7th house, Kit woke fully and began to fuss. Not a pulse. Hunger. Maeve sat on the broken doorstep and fed him from the softened grain mash she had carried since the last border post. Irin stood a few paces away, back to her, watching the road in. 4 days, he said after a while. She looked up. What? This happened 4 days ago. Maybe a little less. He nodded toward the nearest ruin. Too much collapse for fresh damage. Not enough rot for longer than that. She looked at the dead horse lying half behind the stable wall. He was right. Then we missed them by 4 days. Yes. Maeve bent her head over Kit and stared at the worn edge of the feeding spoon in her hand. The dead man at Ashvale had said north. Veyron. Not maybe. Not if possible. He had handed her a living child and a destination, and she had taken both, because there had been no one else left to carry either. She had crossed forest and border and checkpoint and ridge, and the place she had been sent to had been gone almost before she started moving. Kit finished the mash and reached blindly toward the front of her tunic, searching for something else. Her hand shook once as she wiped his mouth. "We stay tonight," she said. Irin turned. "There's no safety here." "I didn't say safety. I said we stay." His eyes went to the ruined hall, the open approach roads, the tree line beyond the eastern field. "You think there's something left to find?" Yes, that was the only answer she was giving him. He held her gaze for a beat. Then, "Fine. We take the north storehouse. It still has 3 walls and 1 entrance." She stood with Kit and followed him. The north storehouse smelled of old grain and rain-damaged wood. The roof held. 1 shutter was missing, but the opening was narrow enough that a grown man would have trouble fitting through without a lot of noise. Iran cleared the interior first. Maeve made a bed space in the driest corner and set Kit down on folded cloth. He did not cry. He stared at the ceiling beams and waved 1 fist lazily in the air, content in a way that made no sense in a ruined place. Maeve sat beside him and listened to Iran move outside, checking the perimeter, shifting debris away from the door, making the sort of practical adjustments that kept people alive when they had run out of better options. When he came back in, he had a water skin and a bundle of cloth under 1 arm. "I found blankets," he said. She took one. "Thank you." He crouched near the door instead of sitting beside her. Far enough to give her space, close enough to move fast if needed. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Near dark, Maeve rose and crossed the settlement alone. Irin stood when she did. "Where are you going?" "To look properly." "You've been looking all day." "I've been searching for survivors." "That's done." She picked up the lantern she'd found hanging in the storehouse. "Now I'm looking for what they missed." He looked as if he wanted to argue. Then he took a second lantern from the floor and said, "Then I'm coming." They started at the main hall again. Night made the damage easier to read. Fire, once cold, left sharp boundaries. A beam that had failed early. A wall that had been cut before it burned. Maeve moved through the wreckage slowly, holding the lantern low. She was not a soldier. She had no gift for military formations or battlefield command. But she moved goods through territories other people controlled. She saw routes, pressure points, places where hands had touched what they were not supposed to touch. At the rear of the hall, she found the first thing that made her stop. The lockbox room had not been smashed open from the outside. The bar had been lifted cleanly. The inner latch had splintered inward. "Someone opened this from inside," she said. Aaron came to stand beside her. He looked once, then twice. Yes, the hall was breached from the front. If they were under attack, no one should have been opening the records room. No one under attack, and thinking clearly. Maeve crouched near the broken latch. There were dark stains on the floorboards, old enough to have gone brown-black. "They came for names first," she said. Iron did not answer. She looked up at him. "You know something." He rested one hand on the damaged frame and looked over the room without really seeing it. "I know this wasn't random." "I already knew that. I know the attack was planned by someone who had scouts, patience, and the confidence to hit 2 northern clans inside a week." She stood. "2?" she said. Iron met her eyes. Ashvale and Veyron were hit by the same hand. Maeve stared at him. "You knew that and said nothing?" "I know the pattern." "Pattern is not proof, not to a council, and not against an alpha who will move the moment he thinks he's named." "Proof of what?" His jaw shifted once. Of who? That landed between them and stayed there. Maeve's grip tightened on the lantern handle. And who do you suspect? He looked away first, which told her more than the answer would have. I'm not naming an alpha to you on a suspicion I can't yet support, he said. Not in a ruined hall with a child sleeping in a grain store and one active hunting group still looking for him. Suspicion would make you wary. It would not stop him. Maeve stepped back. Not because she was afraid. Because she needed the space before she said something she couldn't take back. That's convenient. It's careful. For you. For anyone still alive. She wanted to keep pushing. She could feel it. The pull to force the name out of him, to drag certainty into the open whether he thought it was ready or not. But Kit was in the storehouse. Night had settled fully. Veyron was dead around them, and the only thing more useless than suspicion was suspicion shouted in the dark. She turned away and kept searching. They found more in the healer's room. Cabinet doors open, supplies taken selectively, not looted, chosen. In the elder quarters, drawers pulled out and dumped, but not all of them. In one back room, a map rack had been cut from the wall and removed entirely. By the time they returned to the storehouse, Maeve had built a shape in her mind she did not like. Ashvale had not been erased in panic. Veyron had not been burned for revenge. Someone was removing lines, records, claims, witnesses. And Kit slept through all of it, one hand curled near his face, unaware that the land waiting for him had become a grave before he'd been brought to it. They spent 2 days in Veyron. On the first morning, Maeve searched the outer fields and burial ground, while Aran rode the northern perimeter and sent 2 of his hidden bordermen west with sealed orders. She did not ask what the orders said. He did not offer. She found a child's shoe by the south wall, a training knife under the ash behind the second dwelling, blood on the inside latch of a cellar door that had been forced from within and then barred shut from the outside. No bodies in that cellar. Nothing except overturned shelves and the stale air of a place people had hidden in until someone opened it. When she came out, Iran was waiting near the well with Kit in his arms. Maeve stopped. He had one hand under the child's back and the other braced across the small body with the instinctive care of someone who knew what could be dropped and what could not. Kit was chewing on the edge of Iran's thumb with total concentration. "You left him with me," Iran said. "I left him sleeping." He woke. Maeve crossed the yard and took the water skin from his belt without asking. She drank and gave it back. "Any pulse?" she asked. "None." That was true. Kit felt steady, even from a few feet away. The wild, uncontrolled flare that had dragged half the Eastern Territory onto their trail had narrowed to almost nothing. "He only does it when frightened now," Maeve said. Iran looked down at the child. "Then we keep him from getting frightened." Simple. Impossible. He said it anyway. On the second day, Maeve found the proof that Ashvale and Veyron had been linked before the attacks. In a half-collapsed back room behind the records hall, under a broken chest and a layer of wet plaster, she found a travel ledger sealed in wax gone soft with heat damage. Most of the writing inside had blurred, but not all. She turned pages carefully and found dates, names, supply transfers from Ashvale to Veyron over the last 2 months, grain, medicines, winter cloth, and then a final entry made 6 days before Ashvale burned. Delivered under request of Northern Witness Protocol. Maeve read it twice. Iran stood in the doorway while she held the page to the light. "This is why they both got hit," she said. He did not ask what she meant. She handed him the ledger. His eyes moved over the final line, then to the earlier pages, then back again. "Veyron was sheltering someone from Ashvale," Maeve said. "Or records, or both." "Yes. And whoever attacked Ashvale knew Veyron had taken it." "Yes." She looked at him hard. "So your suspicion got stronger." "It did. And still no name." "No name I can use yet." Maeve laughed once, without humor, and shoved fallen plaster aside with the toe of her boot. "You keep talking about use, as if saying it aloud changes what it is. It changes what happens after." She stood and faced him fully in the ruined doorway. I have been carrying that child since the night his clan died. I crossed your border because a dead man told me north, and the north was already ash under my feet before I reached it. If you think I'm too fragile to hear a suspicion, you're wrong. I don't think you're fragile. Then what do you think? He held the ledger in one hand, careful not to smear the damaged ink. I think if I say the name without proof, you will carry it with you. And if we're taken before I can make it useful, that name dies with us, instead of ending the man who ordered this. A suspicion can keep us alive. It can't convict him. That silenced her for a reason she disliked. Because it made sense. Maeve looked away first. Out into the ruined yard. At the broken well. At the child they had both somehow begun measuring their hours around. When do we leave? She asked. At first light tomorrow. Northwest. Where? Hilda's settlement. Neutral ground. She can shelter Kit, while I decide what can be done with what we found. While you decide, Maeve repeated. Irin didn't answer that. He gave her back the ledger instead. That night, they slept in turns again. The settlement stayed dead around them. No riders came, no scouts showed themselves. That bothered Maeve more than open pursuit would have. It meant the remaining hunting group had either lost the trail or chosen patience. At dawn, they left Varen behind. The land northwest of the settlement narrowed into broken ridges and old water-cut channels where the path bent around stone and dropped sharply without warning. Maeve took the lead. This was the sort of ground she trusted, not because it was safe, but because it punished anyone who moved through it badly. Kit rode against her chest for the first half of the morning and then began to fuss, restless from the heat of constant contact. Irin held out his arms without comment. Maeve gave the child over. No pulse. By midday, she knew they were being watched. No sound, no visible movement, just absences. A bird line lifting too early from the rocks to the east. A stretch of scrub where the wind moved one direction and a branch trembled against it in another. She slowed slightly. They're close, she said. Irin shifted Kit higher against his shoulder. How many? Not enough for confidence. Too many for comfort. He did not smile, but she felt the almost smile there. The channel ahead split in two. One path wider, easier, obvious. The other narrower, dropping hard between two outcrops before widening again into a dry stone throat with high walls on either side. Maeve pointed left. That way. It's a trap. Yes. He looked at her, then at the terrain, then back at her face. You want them in it before we are. I want them committed before they realize the walls cut both ways. He handed Kit back. Then keep moving. Maeve did not waste breath answering. She took Kit and ran. Not blindly, clean foot placement, measured descent. She knew exactly how fast she could move with the child held high and tight, and how much noise she could afford. Behind her, she heard Irin's pace match the route she'd chosen. The first arrow struck stone above her head and snapped. There. The second came low. Irin caught it with his forearm guard and kept moving. Maeve reached the mouth of the narrowest section and cut right into the shadow of the wall, where the path kinked sharply and forced pursuit to funnel in single file before widening a few yards ahead. She pressed herself and Kit into the notch she'd seen on the way down, barely deep enough for one adult to hide. Irin took one glance at the terrain and understood. Stay there, he said. 3 men came over the descent too fast. Trackers, not disciplined soldiers, good enough to follow. Hungry enough to rush when they thought the end was visible. The first saw Irin and reached for his blade at the same instant the Alpha King stripped his shirt clasp and let the shift take him. Maeve had seen partial shifts before. Claws under skin, eyes changing, teeth too long for a human mouth. This was not that. Bone moved under flesh with a violence the body accepted because it had no choice. His shoulders widened first, spine flexed and dropped. Hands struck stone as paws before the rest of him finished the transition. Fur rolled dark across his back and flanks in a rush that seemed to erase the shape of the man she had known on the road and replace it with something older and far less negotiable. The wolf that landed in the throat of the pass was enormous, not wild, not uncontrolled. Worse for the men rushing in after him, because control meant intention, and intention meant they had just run straight into the killing range of something that knew exactly what it was doing. The first tracker barely had time to stop. The wolf hit him high and drove him backward into the second man. The third tried to draw a bow in a space too narrow for it. Maeve heard the crack of wood against stone, the curse cut short, then the wet sound of impact. Kit did not cry. He watched, silent, one hand gripping the front of Maeve's tunic. More men were coming down the uppercut. Maeve could hear boots skidding on gravel, hear the hesitation ripple through them when they saw what blocked the pass. She rose from the notch just enough to grab a loose stone the size of her fist and threw it hard into the far wall above the wider path mouth. The rock hit, bounced, started a slide. Not enough to bury anyone. Enough to make them think the ground was less stable than it was. One of the men above shouted a warning. Another slipped. The line behind him tangled. In a space that narrow, confusion was as useful as blood. The wolf moved again, fast, clean, no waste. When the last of the attackers broke and tried to retreat up the cut, Iran let them run. He did not pursue beyond the point where the walls widened and their numbers might start to matter again. He stood in the center of the pass, sides heaving once, twice, blood dark on his muzzle and shoulder, and turned his head toward the notch where Maeve waited with the child. She stepped out. Their eyes met. She saw the wolf. Fully saw him, the weight of him, the intelligence in the stillness, the restraint. He could have torn every body in that narrow place apart. He hadn't needed to. Kit reached one small hand toward him. The wolf's ears flicked forward. Then he backed 2 paces, gave the space he thought she might need, and the shift back began. It looked harder in reverse. When he stood again in his own skin, braced one hand on the rock wall, breathing hard, Maeve took off her outer wrap and threw it to him. He caught it without looking away from her. "Any more?" he asked. She listened, counted the silence, measured the slope. No. The rest broke. He pulled the wrap around his shoulders and glanced at the bodies in the pass. "Then we move before they remember their courage." Maeve nodded. She adjusted Kit. He had gone quiet again, calmer than she had any right to expect. There had been no pulse, not even in the middle of the attack. They started northwest once more. This time, when Iran came to walk beside her instead of behind, she did not move away. Hilda's settlement sat in a depression between 2 hills, hidden from any road until you were already in it. That was the point. The buildings were low and spread wide, made of the same stone as the hillsides they pressed against. No flags, no markers, no visible guards, though Maeve had counted 3 positions in the surrounding trees before they crossed the outer boundary. She did not mention them to Iran. He had already noted them. She could tell by the angle he held his shoulders. Not tense, not relaxed, something between the two that meant he was accounting for variables and filing them. They had been walking for 2 days since the pass. Kit had slept through most of the second day, worn out in a way that was different from his usual exhaustion. Less the sleep of an infant tired from movement, more the sleep of something that had been at full alert for too long and finally let the tension go. He woke at intervals, ate, looked around with calm, dark eyes, and went back under. Not a single pulse. Hilda met them at the edge of the tree line before they reached the buildings. She was a small woman who gave the impression of not being small. White hair, cut close to her head. Eyes that moved over people the way hands moved over horses, taking measure, finding the weight and temper of a thing. She looked at Kit first, then at Maeve, then at Iran, and her expression shifted in a way Maeve could not read. "Alpha King," she said. "Hilda, you look terrible. It's been a long week." Hilda's gaze returned to Kit, who was watching her with his usual focused attention. She reached out one finger, and he gripped it immediately. She let him hold on for a moment, then withdrew her hand and stepped back. "Inside," she said, "both of you, the child especially." The main building was warm, banked fire, low ceiling, the smell of dried herbs and something cooking that made Maeve realize she could not remember the last proper meal. Hilda's granddaughter appeared with a basin of water and cloth and took one look at the old blood on Aaron's shirt before leaving to find something else. Hilda sat across the main table from Maeve and said nothing for a time. Kit had been passed to the granddaughter and had gone without complaint, which was the first time in 2 weeks he had accepted anyone who was not Maeve or Aaron. "He's settling," Hilda said. "Yes." Maeve watched the child across the room. "Whatever ground he found it with you." She glanced toward where Aaron stood at the window. "Both of you." Maeve did not answer that. Hilda did not require her to. They stayed the first night without incident. Maeve slept 4 hours in a real bed for the first time since Ashvale. She woke once, reached for Kit from reflex, found him in a wicker cot within arm's reach, and went back under before she had fully registered it. In the morning, Hilda showed her the kitchen, pointed out which herbs hanging from the rafters were for cooking and which were not. Aaron was gone when Maeve came out, his pack still there, which meant he'd walked the perimeter. She knew the shape of his absence now, how much space it took up. That thought did not sit well, so she moved it aside. Kit was in Hilda's lap near the fire, being shown something in a small carved box that was clearly fascinating. He kept trying to open it. Hilda kept redirecting his hands without taking the box away, and he kept returning to it with complete conviction. "He's persistent," Hilda said. "Yes, he gets that from somewhere." Maeve poured water and said nothing. Hilda set the box down in Kit's lap and let him have it. He immediately tried to eat the corner. "You know," Hilda said, in the tone of someone who had decided to say something they'd been holding since yesterday, "the last time Aaron crossed my threshold, he was 19 and had just made the worst political alliance of his early reign." Maeve looked up. "Cassian," Hilda said. The name sat in the room quietly. Cassian and Iran had a compact, 8 years old, maybe 9 by now. Built on trade agreements first, then border security, then the kind of deep territory arrangement that takes years to construct and costs something real to leave. Hilda watched Maeve's face. When Iran chose to shelter a runner with a hunted child instead of letting the matter reach Cassian's door the way it was always going to reach it, he broke that compact without breaking it formally. Maeve set her cup down. "He knew," she said. "He knew what it would cost him." Yes. He knew whose name was behind the attacks from the moment he recognized the pattern in Veyron. "Probably earlier," Hilda said. "Cassian's been absorbing Northern Territory for 3 years. Ashvale and Veyron were the last 2 clans standing between his northern reach and the mountain passes. Their destruction was not a surprise to anyone who had been watching." Maeve stood. "And he said nothing to me. What would you have done with it? That's not the point. It might be part of it." Maeve crossed the room and picked up Kit from Hilda's lap. He complained about the box briefly and then accepted the trade. She held him against her shoulder and looked out the window at the settlement yard, where Iran was now visible, speaking with one of the outer guards. He stood the way he always did, still, accounting for things. She watched him and said nothing until the pressure in her chest made staying quiet feel like work. When he came inside, she was waiting near the door. Iran looked at her face and stopped. "Hilda told you," he said. "She told me about Cassian, about the compact." Maeve kept her voice level. She had not decided whether she was angry. She was deciding right now. "You recognized the pattern at Veyron. You told me you suspected but had no proof. You said you wouldn't name him without proof. That's true. You didn't tell me that naming him would also mean ending an 8-year alliance and everything built on top of it. Also true. That's not the same as not having proof. That's having a cost you didn't share. I had enough to suspect him," Aaron said. "I did not yet have enough to put his name into record and survive what came after." He held her gaze. He did not apologize, and he did not deflect. She had learned over 2 weeks of shared road that he did neither of those things. "You're right," he said. That was not what she had expected. She shifted Kit higher on her shoulder. "Then tell me now." He crossed to the table and sat. Not to put distance between them, she understood the difference by now. He sat because what he was about to say had weight, and he was giving it room. Cassian ordered the destruction of Ashvale and Veyron to clear the territorial claim. Kit is the last living heir of the Ashvale bloodline. While he lives, Cassian cannot legally absorb the land without challenge. Veyron was sheltering the witness records that proved Kit's lineage. He looked at the child. That's why both clans were hit within a week. It wasn't 2 attacks. It was one action in 2 parts. Maeve said, "You knew this before we left Veyron." "I knew the shape of it. The ledger gave me the anchor." "And the compact?" Something tightened in his jaw. "I built 8 years of northern stability on Cassian's cooperation. Ending it means 3 border territories go unstable overnight. 2 of them have clans with unresolved grievances against the crown. Walking away from Cassian formally, publicly, without a case strong enough for counsel, means I hand him the argument that I broke the compact for personal reasons and not for cause. And you didn't want to tell me that. I didn't want you carrying the weight of my political cost on top of everything else." The room was very quiet. "That wasn't your decision to make," Maeve said. "No, it wasn't." She stood there with Kit, and the words settled between them. She felt something in her chest move aside to make room for the thing underneath, because she recognized what he had done. She had done it her entire life. Moving in silence. Not sharing the weight, because sharing the weight meant someone else got close enough to feel it with you. She sat down across from him. "Is there anything else," she said, "that you haven't told me?" He looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said, unhurried, carrying something she had not prepared for. "I recognized the mate bond at the Iron Passage," he said. "The first night, when Kit stopped crying. The fire was the only sound in the room." Maeve looked at Kit, who had gotten hold of her braid and was working through it with focused concentration. She looked at her own hands, then at Aaron, who was watching her with the same steadiness he always had, and something beneath it that was not steady at all. "You said nothing," she said. "No." "For 2 weeks." "Yes. While I was—" She stopped, chose the word. "While it was arriving for me." "Yes." She set Kit carefully on the bench beside her, where he grabbed the edge of the table and began investigating its grain with both thumbs. She stared at the wood surface. "Why?" she asked. "Because you were already carrying a dead man's mission and a hunted child and 2 active hunting groups." He paused once. "And because you were going to run. You don't know that, Maeve." She looked up. "You were going to run," he said, not unkindly. She wanted to argue. She sat with the impulse and let it move through her and did not say anything, because the honest answer was that she did not know for certain he was wrong. "I still might," she said. "I know. That doesn't bother you. It bothers me considerably. It doesn't change what I told you." Kit slapped both hands on the table and looked up at both of them in turn with the expression he had worn through every difficult moment of the last 2 weeks. Open, expectant, utterly unbothered, as if he had already decided how this ended and was waiting with some patience for the adults to catch up. Maeve exhaled slowly. "I haven't decided anything," she said. "I'm not asking you to. What are you asking?" He leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking you to stop moving for 5 minutes and let this be something real instead of something you're already 3 steps ahead of." She sat still. Kit patted her arm once and went back to the table edge. They had 2 hours of stillness before the last group found them. Maeve heard it first, the particular shift in the settlement's ambient noise that meant something had changed at the outer boundary. She was on her feet before the first guard shouted. Hilda was already moving. "Take the child to the back room. The door bolts from inside." Maeve looked at Aaron. "Go," he said. She went. The back room was low and windowless. She pulled the bolt and sat with Kit pressed to her chest in the dark and listened. Kit was completely still against her. Whatever his body had once done in response to fear had gone quiet over 2 weeks of movement and company. She could feel his pulse in the soft place below his ear. Steady, ordinary, the pulse of a child safe in someone's arms. The sounds outside were not long. A fight with purpose did not sound like chaos. It had a shape, a compression of activity, a series of decisive moments rather than a sustained roar. She counted the beats of it the way she counted miles. When the noise stopped and did not restart, she counted to 30 before she stood. She unbolted the door. Iron was in the main room, standing over a man on the floor, breathing, restrained, hands bound behind him with his own belt. Hilda was checking a gash along her granddaughter's forearm. One of the outer guards stood near the door with blood on his collar that was not his. Maeve looked at the man on the floor. He was the type that hunting groups sent to lead in close. Experienced, careful, with the look of someone who had done this long enough to be good at it. "How many came?" she asked. 8, Erin said. This one gave the orders. Maeve stepped over a broken piece of furniture and crouched in front of the captive. He watched her with the wariness of a man assessing how much he had already lost and whether a remaining play existed. There wasn't one. "Where did the order come from?" she asked. He said nothing. She stood and moved aside. Erin crouched where she had been. He did not touch the man. He did not raise his voice. The shift had not fully receded. His eyes still held the amber-bright intensity of a wolf pulled back but not gone entirely, and the man on the floor felt it. She could see it in the way he breathed. "You're protecting the name," Erin said, "of a man who sent 8 people after an infant. Think carefully about what that name is worth to you now." The captive's jaw worked once. "Cassian," he said. "Lord Cassian sent the order. Personally. 3 weeks ago." Maeve stood at the window. Outside, the settlement was returning to itself. A guard clearing debris from the yard. Hilda's granddaughter testing the movement of her bandaged arm. Ordinary sounds doing ordinary work. The name she had been waiting for had finally arrived, and it felt exactly the way she had expected. Not like relief. Like the moment you set down something heavy and realize the ache does not leave immediately with the weight. Iron rose. He looked at Maeve across the room. She looked back. 2 weeks. The Iron Passage. Veyron. The pass where she had watched him shift and not stepped back. Every night watch. Every road. Kit between them like the only honest thing either of them had been carrying this whole time. Kit, who had been still since the fight ended, turned his face toward her and made the small, deliberate sound he made when he wanted to be held. Maeve went to him, picked him up, held him. Over his head, Erin was still watching her. "Hilda can shelter him," she said, "while you go to the council." "While we go to the council," Erin said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then, "I'll need proper boots. Mine are finished." The corner of his mouth moved. "I'll find you boots," he said. That night, after Hilda had gone to sleep and the granddaughter was keeping watch and the captive had been secured in the outer store, Maeve sat by the banked fire with Kit in her lap. He was not asleep. He lay on his back across her legs, staring upward, hands moving in the slow way that meant he was somewhere between awake and somewhere else entirely. Erin came and sat at the opposite end of the bench, not close, just no longer across the room. Kit turned his head toward the new warmth and reached one arm out sideways, fingers spread open, not grabbing, just open, in the direction of both of them. Neither of them moved to take the offered hand, but neither of them left. They stayed in the warmth of the same fire, the 3 of them, until Kit's fingers finally curled and his eyes closed and the long day settled into the quiet dark around them. Davin arrived on the 3rd morning. Maeve heard the horses before she saw them. 4 riders coming in from the South Road, moving with the purposeful pace of people who had been riding since before dawn. She was at the well when they came through the outer boundary, Kit balanced on her hip, and she watched Davin dismount before his horse had fully stopped. He looked at the settlement, at Hilda's building, at Aran, who came out of the side door and crossed the yard to meet him. Then he looked at Maeve. She had the sense, not for the first time, that Davin filed information with the same efficiency she used for roots. He saw things once and knew where to put them. He held Erin's forearm. "You look better than I expected." "You expected worse. You've been gone more than 2 weeks with no fixed position and an active hunting group. Yes, I expected worse. Davin stepped back. The council will start arriving by midday. I sent the summons from the 2nd Eastern Post the night you sent word. 6 territories confirmed. Cassian's people are not among them. He wasn't invited, Aaron said. No, I thought not. Davin glanced again at Maeve, then at Kit, in the way of someone confirming a theory he'd already formed. I also brought the Crown Recorder. If we're doing this formally, we're doing it completely. Aaron nodded once. Davin moved toward the building. As he passed Maeve, he stopped. Runner, he said. Beta. He looked at Kit, who looked back at him with the focused attention he gave to new faces. After a moment, Kit reached out and grabbed the edge of Davin's sleeve. Davin let him hold it briefly, then disengaged with practiced patience. He's healthy, Davin said. Yes. Good. He moved on. Maeve looked at Aaron across the yard. He was already watching her. She turned back to the well and finished drawing water. By midday, the settlement had transformed into something it was not usually built to be. Hilda's main building was large enough for a gathering, but not designed for ceremony, which suited the occasion. 6 alpha representatives arrived in intervals, not the alphas themselves in most cases, but their designated voices, men and women who carried authority like a borrowed coat. They were polite, careful, and watching everything. The Crown Recorder set up at the far end of the main table with 2 sealed ledgers and a brass inkwell and the expression of someone who had recorded difficult proceedings before and intended to do so again without visible opinion. Maeve stood near the south wall and watched the room fill. Hilda appeared at her elbow. You'll be called first, Hilda said. Before the captive, before Iran. Maeve looked at her. Why first? Because you're the one who found it. The records, the lockbox, the connection between the 2 attacks. If Iran presents it, it becomes a political action. If you present it, it's testimony. Hilda's voice was low and precise. There's a difference. I'm a runner. I have no standing in a council proceeding. You have eyes that went into Veyron and came back out. That's the only standing that matters today. Maeve looked at the ledger she had carried in her pack since Veyron. The wax was cracked further at the edges from travel. The cover had picked up a smear of dried mud at some point in the pass. She had wrapped it in oilcloth 2 days ago when the rain came, and it had survived. She set it on the table. The proceeding took most of the afternoon. Maeve spoke for longer than she had expected. She had not prepared words. She found she did not need to. The sequence of events was clear in her memory in the way that urgent things became clear, every detail preserved by the necessity of having lived through it. She described Ashvale as she had found it. The dead man, the instructions, the 3 days of running. She described Veyron without softening it. The Crown Recorder's pen moved steadily. None of the representatives interrupted. When she reached the lockbox room, she set the ledger on the table and opened it to the final entry. The Crown Recorder crossed to examine it, compared it with something in his own ledger, and returned to his seat without expression. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Davin brought in the captive. The man had spent 2 nights in Hilda's outer store and looked like it. He stood with his hands still bound and looked at the assembled representatives with the expression of a man calculating whether any remaining option existed and finding none. He confirmed everything: Cassian's name, the timing, the nature of the orders, destroy both clans, recover the witness records, ensure the child did not survive to make a legal claim. He spoke in the flat tone of someone who had decided that holding the information was more expensive than releasing it. The Crown Recorder wrote without pause. Iran spoke last. He laid out the territorial claim, Kit's lineage, the Ashvale bloodline, the legal obstacle Kit represented to Cassian's northern absorption. He spoke without ornamentation, presenting it the way he presented most things, as a sequence of facts arranged in the order that made them most useful. When he finished, the senior representative from the westernmost territory leaned forward. The compact between the Crown and Cassian's territory, she said. It predates this. It does, Iran said. The compact does not protect actions of this kind, Davin said from his position near the wall. Territorial expansion conducted through the destruction of clans under crown protection is not within compact boundaries. It never was. The woman looked at her counterparts. Something passed through the room. Not agreement exactly, but the absence of disagreement, which in a gathering like this served the same function. The Crown Recorder waited. Iren said, "Call the decision." It was not unanimous. One territory abstained, citing the need to consult with their alpha directly. The remaining 5 confirmed. Cassian's status was formally stripped. His territory would be held in provisional crown custody until the Council of Alphas met in full session to determine redistribution. The Ashvale bloodline claim was entered into the crown record with Kit's name, his full lineage name, which Maeve had not known until the Crown Recorder read it aloud from a secondary ledger Davin had brought. She looked at the child in Hilda's arms across the room. He had spent the entire proceeding watching the movement of light through the window above the main table, tracking it with the patient attention he brought to anything that moved slowly and caught his interest. His full name sounded different from what she'd been calling him, larger, more specific, like a door opening onto a room she hadn't known was there. Hilda brought the Guardian forward after the council representatives had dispersed. He was a quiet man, middle-aged, broad-handed, with a steady quality that reminded Maeve of packed earth. He carried no visible weapons. He had arrived with Davin's party and had waited in the outer building through the entire proceeding without being told to. Hilda had chosen him. That was credential enough for Maeve, though she hadn't asked and wasn't sure she could have explained why. Hilda brought Kit across the room. "This is Aldrin," she told Kit, in the same direct tone she used for everyone. "He's going to look after you for a while." Kit looked at Aldrin. Aldrin looked back. Kit reached out one arm toward him, not the urgent reaching he had done in the early days, the grasping desperation of something too long held and too frightened to let go. This was different, calm, deliberate, the gesture of someone who had assessed the situation and made a considered decision. Aldrin took him. Kit settled against his chest and looked back at the room, at Maeve, at Iren, at Hilda, with the expression of a child who had gotten what he came for and was now prepared to see what came next. Maeve stood in the middle of the room with nothing in her arms for the first time in more than 2 weeks. The weight of absence was specific. She had not expected that. She had expected relief, or the clean feeling of a completed run. Task done, hands free, ready for the road. What she felt instead was the shape of what had been there, pressed into her chest like the memory of warmth. She looked at Aldrin holding the child, at Kit, already engaged with the latch on Aldrin's coat. She picked up her pack from the floor, adjusted the strap. Old habit. The room had emptied around her gradually, the recorder packing his ledgers, Hilda moving toward the kitchen, Davin stepping out with 2 of the departing representatives. Only the fire remained active, working through the wood it had been given, doing its ordinary work. Maeve walked out. The yard was cooling as the afternoon shifted toward evening. The settlement's ambient sounds had returned, small, domestic, the noise of a place going about its business after the interruption of importance had passed through. She stood at the edge of the yard with her pack over one shoulder and the road south visible through the gap in the tree line. She knew that road. She had come in on it. She knew the first turn and the second, knew the place where it split toward the eastern territories and the place where it didn't, knew the corridor route that ran parallel to it if she needed to avoid the checkpoint at the lower crossing. She had always known the exits. Iren had pointed that out the first night, at the border post, and she had not corrected him because he was right. She stood at the edge of the yard and looked at the road and thought about what it meant that she had known the exit for 3 days and had not used it. "I don't have a reason to keep you here," Iren said. She had not heard him come out. She had heard everything on that road, snapped branches, distant horses, the particular sound of a person trying not to make sound. She had not heard him. She turned. He stood a few paces back, pack in hand, road-worn in a way that 3 days in Hilda's settlement had not fully undone. He looked like someone who had said what he was about to say several times in his head and had decided on this version. "I don't have a reason to keep you here," he said again. "The mission is done. The child is safe. The council recorded your testimony. You've done everything the dead man asked of you and more." He paused. "I'm not going to invent a reason." Maeve turned back to the road. "That's very honorable," she said. "It's not honor. I'm aware of what I want. I'm also aware that what I want doesn't override what you choose." She was quiet. "I've been choosing roads my whole life," she said. "I'm good at it. I know when a route is going to cost more than it returns. I know when to take the longer path. Yes, I don't know what this costs. Neither do I." She turned to look at him. He was watching her with the directness he always used, not performing patience, simply having it. "You waited 3 weeks," she said, "at the Iron Passage. Everything after, all of it, you stayed without being asked and without making it about staying. Yes, that's a large thing to find out someone did. I know. I don't know how to hold it yet." "You don't have to hold it yet." He was still. "You just have to stop pretending you're about to leave." Something in her chest released, not dramatically. The way a knot releases when the tension finally exceeds what the fiber can hold. Not a break, a letting go. Her wolf went quiet with it, the low, constant vigilance of 3 weeks dropping its register into something she had not felt in a long time. She felt it in her sternum first, then across her shoulders, then, specifically and unmistakably, in the place where the warmth had been building since the 4th night in the drover's hut, that thing she had refused to name, that she had been carrying alongside Kit and the ledger and the weight of every dead face in Veyrin. The mate bond settled, not loudly, not with the urgency of something long denied. With the particular quality of something arriving at the time, it was always going to arrive, because the people involved were finally standing still enough for it to catch up. Aaron exhaled slowly. She